You ever have those DMs that try a little too hard to make a good homebrew rule and just kind of screw it up? Yeah, we're talking about that. What are some of the worst D&D homebrew rules you've seen? Let us know in the comments below. Today's sponsor is The Best Available. Come see these intrepid adventurers grow stronger and delve into the dungeon of the Mad Mage in a lovingly edited and illustrated D&D web series. Link in the description. I played in a campaign where the DM homebrewed leveling up. When you earned enough XP, you had to find a trainer for your class and spend several weeks with them to gain your level. Then, he ran a plot with a time constraint. We ended up with enough XP to level up 2 or 3 times, but couldn't actually gain the levels. Meanwhile, the monster CRs had been ratcheted up to match the levels our XP totals indicated we should have. Needless to say, it was not a fun house rule. My boyfriend and I used to play D&D with a couple of friends of ours. The DM was the girlfriend, and the boyfriend was a power gamer with minimal interest in roleplay who just kind of liked, doing lots of damage. So, the DM would let him do overpowered stuff to keep him interested. The boyfriend jokingly warned us that he was playing a rogue assassin and that it was really broken. We were surprised because assassin rogues, when played rules as written, aren't particularly strong. We found out that they were using a homebrew, very liberal interpretation of the rules. Apparently, the rule that any hit you score against a creature that is surprised is a critical hit isn't a reference to the surprised condition. It just means if they're surprised to see him. This dude spent every fight hiding behind a rock or in the shadows or some other nonsense, running out to hit the enemy, which auto-crits because the guy is surprised to see him apparently, then running away to hide behind the rock again. But because the enemy is just so surprised, they apparently don't get an attack of opportunity for some reason. But his movement is only 30 feet, so he's literally just crouching behind a rock that's 15 feet away, and the enemy is still consistently surprised for some reason. His dagger also did an extra D10 plus some modifier, I can't remember what, poison damage, which was also doubled each turn by the crit, as long as he had poisoned it, one action, with the free poison that he just had for some reason. He ended up doing a stupid amount of damage each turn because he was also adding sneak attack because they're so surprised, ooh! And because his hiding apparently resets the combat, so the creature hasn't taken its turn against him yet. He was getting advantage too. This meant that every second turn after taking a turn to poison his dagger, he was doing the knife's base damage plus poison damage plus sneak attack, all doubled because of an auto crit, rolling with advantage, and never getting hit because he was so cleverly hidden behind the rock, bushes, or shadows. Now, this wasn't the worst rule ever, but maybe the worst GM play I've had. This happened when 5th edition had just been released at an Adventurers League game. Before the game even started, we were talking, and the GM brought up the idea of using house rules, specifically self-harm and fumbles. If you rolled a natural 1, I kinda laughed it off, saying that I'd had some funny moments with fumbles in past long-term groups. I'd played since 3.5 edition, but maybe it would be best to avoid it in this case since it's a community game, and we're not guaranteed to have the same group every week, and it could technically throw off the balance for someone's character. The GM kinda laughed and said something like, "Yeah, it could cause some funny moments. So, we all want to play with that rule?" There were mixed reactions, a lot of first-time players who didn't seem to know which way to go, so I just kinda went along with it. The initial combat starts, and we're taking on some goblins. I'm playing a dwarf fighter, and what happens on my first attack? A natural 1. Well, the GM says, "Uh-oh, I'll roll to see the effect." Rolls behind a screen, of course, and goes for an Oscar with his dramatic jaw drop, announcing, "Your sword breaks." I was pissed. I was expecting him to say I dropped it and needed to spend my next action picking it up, or maybe hit my toe for a couple of points of damage. But now, As a fighter, I have to spend the rest of combat using unarmed strikes. He wouldn't let me scavenge during combat. Now, we finish combat, and I ask to look for any weapon to take with me. The GM says I have to roll to search, and guess what? Nat 1. Now, not only is every weapon I find on the bodies broken somehow, but I cut myself for some damage while, rooting and looting around. Cool! Can I find a branch to use as a club? Nope, the failed roll counted for any searching I did. We make it to town, and I ask to find a merchant that I can buy a weapon from, and of course, I don't have enough coins on me to buy a sword according to the book. I basically begged the DM to allow me to purchase a sword on credit. I think I'd promised I'd do a favor for the merchant in addition to paying back the full amount when I got the coin. Anyway, I never went back to that store after that. I didn't want even the slightest chance that I'd see that guy again. I had actually brought a friend with me that night who was playing for the first time, and when we left, he was just like, "What a dick. That was some horrible GMing." Yeah, that was. It sounded like they had a personal hate bone around for you. My DM once sprung a poison trap on the party. The poison makes you hallucinate and see everyone around you as a horrifying monster. We all failed to save, but my character was forced to dive into a swamp nearby, and I was forced to sit down there until I drowned. I called bullshit, and the DM reacted by saying a bunch of giant frogs were coming to eat me, so I had to make 3 separate ability checks using different abilities to swim away from them. Apparently some holdover from 4th edition. The DCs were 16 or something, so my character died off screen just like that. This was 5th edition, and that rule had never been implemented, and we never used it again. It felt like my DM just hated my character and found any excuse that they could to kill him. This was one of many strange rulings, but it was the one that finally got me to leave the table. Hey, proud of you for standing up for yourself. We would use a gridded map for combat, but you couldn't move diagonally. I think the DM thought it was unrealistic that you could move faster along diagonals, but instead of doing the alternating 5 and 10 foot diagonal rule, you just couldn't move that way. Obviously, you could still move 1 square horizontal and then 1 square vertical, taking 10 feet every time, but this caused a whole other mess of issues. Why are diagonals always slower now? Also, if something was standing in one of the adjacent squares you needed, you just couldn't move there at all. The DM belatedly announced that advantage was only granted in combat when a spell specifically called it out. Prone, flanking, and physically restrained did nothing for martial classes except add flavor in combat. Yes, I know flanking is optional, but I'm just used to most groups allowing it. Removing advantage for any non-caster just sucks. Martials already get crapped on all the time, why are you nerfing them even more? I think one of the funniest experiences was a group I took over when I moved to California in 1982, baby. They had been running a campaign they made up themselves based on what they thought the rules actually said. When they learned I had been playing for years, they asked me to take over. Looking at their character sheets, they would have things like 15 hit points and 25 bonus hit points. I was confused as hell, especially when they explained that they got the bonus hit points from killing monsters. Apparently, if you killed a monster, you got bonus hit points. This was because, for example, an orc in 1st edition for experience was listed as 8 plus 1 HP, which was supposed to mean 8 experience points plus 1 additional experience point for each hit point it had. Instead, they interpreted it as 8 experience points for killing it, and the character also got 1 bonus HP. I still shake my head at that over 4 decades later. I've got 2 rules from the same campaign. No prepared or known spells. This meant that full and half casters could cast any spell on their list. Casters became even more versatile and overpowered, while martial classes didn't get any bonuses. Mana. The DM ruled that every level, instead of having separate spell slots, we had stackable mana. A 1st level spell slot equals 1 mana. A second level spell slot equals 2 mana, a third level spell slot equals 3 mana, so on and so forth. This mana could be used to cast different level spells. So, a 5th level wizard would have a total of 16 mana. A fireball, being a 3rd level spell, costs 3 mana. If we divide 16 by 3, that equals 5 fireballs on full mana. This system was already easy to abuse, and again, martial classes didn't get any comparable bonuses. Now, let's take a level 20 wizard. They would have enough mana to cast 9 9th level spells in one day. And, using the base rule of prepared spells, that wizard could choose whatever 9th level spell from their list each day. 9 wish spells? Boom. 5 meteor swarms and 4 wishes? Go right ahead, buddy! I think that the worst part was that these rules were introduced, not discussed or mentioned beforehand, in the first session of the campaign a few weeks ago. The DM is a good friend and very passionate about the homebrew world, but I don't think they see the problem with this system, or they haven't tested it yet. I'll be sure to bring it up before the next session because if the DM sticks to these rules, I definitely won't enjoy playing a half-caster. I love artificers, and the marshals in the group won't enjoy it either. For some reason, one of my previous DMs replaced HP with a wound system. Instead of taking damage, you would take a wound, and after accumulating a certain number of wounds, you'd go unconscious. The number of wounds you could take was arbitrary, with only slight changes based on your con modifier. The worst part was that the DM wasn't really clear about what he meant when he mentioned this wound system at session 0. Pretty much everyone assumed it was just some sort of homebrew injury table where taking a certain amount of damage gives you an injury. I would have been relatively fine with that, even though I'm not the biggest fan of injuries in 5th edition. Needless to say, I only stuck around for one session before dropping out of that game. My DM in a campaign, I don't play in their games anymore, once ruled that I broke my magical musket because I gently tapped the buttstock on a wall to check if it was hollow during a dungeon crawl. We were playing Storm King's Thunder. Yes! This DM had repeatedly been picking on my character because they hated that I could do a lot of damage. Hunter Ranger with Gunner and Sharpshooter, baby. The party immediately joined in my outrage when they did this, as it was obvious they were targeting me. I had been repeatedly starved of magic items, which the rest of the group noticed, and my character wasn't good for anything else. It was blatantly obvious the DM was trying to nerf me through bullying. The DM tried to argue that because I shot the gun so much, the recoil would have damaged the stock enough to crack it if I hit it on anything. Huh? This DM also gave us a healbot NPC in one fight during a siege who demanded hundreds, then thousands of gold to cast healing spells while we were fighting to survive. Civilians and soldiers were dying around us, and the DM argued that I was breaking my alignment, chaotic good, when I tried to rob the healbot NPC after the fight. I wanted to return the money they taxed from healing the party members and civilians during the battle. The DM dropped a max level Spirit Guardians on my character and wanted my alignment to change to chaotic neutral. They even tried to give me a temporary curse for this supposed alignment shift. Luckily, the rest of the party joined in on my side and they backed down. Our DM is great, but has a single rule he came up with for basically no reason. Paladin Smite doesn't roll double dice on a crit. Sneak Attack does, though. His reasoning is, well, the Paladin would just only smite on crits. And it's like, who cares? It's always been a weird ruling to me and a few other group members. No one has played a Paladin since that ruling either. Now I want to reiterate, my DM is fantastic, but that one ruling bothers me to this day. Any homebrew rule that involves you only get XP if you dealt the killing blow. Way to encourage murder hobo only gameplay, guys, unbalanced parties towards exclusively DPS builds, and discourage any sort of cooperation. This is one you'll occasionally see featured on r/RPG horror stories for a reason. Also, any type of combat crit fail table. This punishes getting a higher level in fighter, or frankly any other class whose main way of scaling in combat is being able to roll more attacks. Warlocks get the same problem to a slightly lesser extent with how Eldritch Blast works. Roll more dice, get more nat 1s, hurt yourself and the rest of the party more. Absolutely fun! Ta-da! Hey everybody, Brian Von VA checking in after the vid. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell, and let us know in the comments below what are some of the worst D&D homebrew rules you've seen. Maybe some that made you even leave the table. We want to know them all. And of course, if you want to support us, you can join our membership program. You don't have to, but it does keep the lights on and gives you early access to videos. We love you all. See you next time. Toodaloo for now.